I've been a truck driver for almost 15 years, and in that time, I've seen a lot of strange things on the road. Deer that seem to appear out of nowhere, abandoned cars with no sign of the driver, and even the occasional hitchhiker who gives off a bad vibe. But nothing compares to what I saw on a lonely stretch of highway in West Texas about 3 years ago. It was past midnight, and I was hauling a load of industrial equipment through a desolate area, miles from the nearest town. The only light came from my high beams cutting through the darkness, illuminating the cracked asphalt and the occasional road sign riddled with bullet holes. The highway was empty except for me, and the only sound was the low hum of my engine. I was running on fumes, both literally and figuratively, and planned to stop at the next gas station I came across. But as I crested a hill, my headlights swept over something lying in the ditch on the right side of the road. At first, I thought it was roadkill, maybe a deer or a coyote, but then I saw it move. It was a man. He was lying on his back, arms splayed out, staring straight up at the sky. His clothes were filthy and torn, and he wasn't wearing any shoes. His mouth was slightly open, and for a second, I thought he was dead. But just as I passed him, his head snapped toward my truck, and I swear to God, his eyes locked onto mine through the windshield. Something about him made my skin crawl. He didn't look scared or in pain. He looked expectant. I didn't stop. I've heard too many horror stories about people pulling over to help someone on the side of the road only to get ambushed. So I kept driving, my pulse hammering in my ears. I told myself I'd call 911 at the next stop. About 10 minutes later, I saw something up ahead. A figure standing in the middle of the road. My stomach dropped. It was him. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching against the pavement. My truck came to a stop just a few feet away from him, my headlights bathing him in harsh white light. His face was slack, emotionless, but his eyes were wide and fixed on me. There was no way he could have gotten here on foot. Not that fast, not without me seeing him. I flipped on my high beams, hoping to scare him off, but he didn't move. He just stood there staring. The longer I looked at him, the more I noticed things that didn't make sense. His feet weren't touching the ground, his skin was too pale, and his clothes, though tattered, didn't shift in the wind. Then, without warning, he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, stretching unnaturally across his face, revealing rows of yellowed teeth. And then he started walking toward my truck, slow and deliberate. I threw the truck into reverse, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. As I backed up, I saw something in my mirrors. Movement on both sides of the road. More figures, dozens of them, crawling out of the ditches, emerging from the darkness like insects. They were all barefoot, all dressed in ragged clothing, their faces hidden in shadow. Panic took over. I shifted back into drive and floored it. The man in the road didn't move until the very last second, stepping aside just as I barreled past him. I didn't look back. I drove straight through the night, not stopping until I reached a well-lit truck stop nearly 50 miles away. I sat in my cab for a long time, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled hands, trying to convince myself that I had imagined it. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving down an empty stretch of road, I swear I see him again, standing just on the edge of my headlights, watching. I've been driving trucks for almost 20 years. I've seen a lot of weird things on the road, strange lights in the sky, people walking along desolate stretches of highway at 3 in the morning, even a ghost town that wasn't on my map. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has ever scared me like what happened on Highway 49 last winter. I was hauling a load through the Midwest, somewhere between Missouri and Arkansas, when I found myself on a long, lonely stretch of road. It was past midnight. The highway was dead quiet, and the only things around were miles of trees on both sides. My CB radio was silent, and I hadn't seen another vehicle for at least an hour. The weather had turned bad, cold, misty, with a light fog rolling across the pavement. My headlights cut through it, but everything beyond their reach felt like an endless void. I was already uneasy, but I kept driving. I had deadlines to meet. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Something was standing just beyond the tree line. It was tall, too tall, but thin, like a scarecrow made of bone. I only got a glimpse before I passed it, but that brief look was enough to make my stomach drop. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but something about it was wrong. A few miles later, I caught it again. This time, it was closer. Standing just off the shoulder of the road, motionless. My headlights illuminated it for just a second, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a figure, but not a person. Its limbs were too long, its skin pale and stretched tight over sharp bones. And its face, God, its face was just empty. No eyes, no mouth. Just a smooth, featureless surface where a face should have been. I gripped the wheel tight, refusing to look in my mirrors, afraid I might see it following me. I pressed on the gas, heart pounding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there, just out of sight, watching. And then my radio crackled, a burst of static, then a voice, low, distorted, barely more than a whisper. You see me. I nearly drove off the road. My hands were shaking. I reached for the radio, but before I could respond, the voice came again, clearer this time. I see you. That was it. I floored it, my truck roaring as I pushed it past safe speeds. The road twisted and turned, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. And then I saw the headlights, a pair of them, coming straight at me from the other side of the road. A truck, just like mine, barreling toward me, high beams blinding, horn blaring. I swerved hard, barely avoiding a head-on collision. My trailer fishtailed, tires screaming against the asphalt. I managed to regain control, my heart slamming in my chest. But when I looked back, there was no truck. Nothing, just empty road. The radio crackled one last time, and I'll never forget what I heard next. A laugh, low, guttural, inhuman. Then silence. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. When I finally pulled into a rest stop, I stepped out, legs shaking. I checked my truck, my trailer, everything. All seemed fine, except for one thing. A handprint. A single, pale handprint, pressed against the passenger side window. Too large, too long, fingers stretching almost halfway down the glass. I never drove Highway 49 again. I've been a long-haul truck driver for about 5 years. I've seen my share of weird things out on the road. Ghost towns, strange hitchhikers, even a few UFOs. But nothing comes close to what happened to me. One foggy night in West Texas, I was hauling a load of canned goods to El Paso. It was late, maybe 2:30 in the morning, and the highway was empty. Just me, my rig, and an endless stretch of blacktop cutting through the desert. Kind of lonely that gets under your skin. Then the fog rolled in. It came out of nowhere, thick and soupy, swallowing my headlights. I slowed down, white-knuckling the wheel, leaning forward to make out the road. My GPS was useless. Out here, There wasn't much cell service to begin with. I knew there was a truck stop about 20 miles ahead, so I figured I'd just take it slow and pull in there for the night. That's when I saw it. A figure in the fog, standing right in the middle of the road. I barely had time to react. I slammed the brakes, my tires screeching against the pavement. My rig shuddered to a stop just inches away. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it'd explode. I flicked on my high beams. It was a man. At least, I think it was a man. He was tall, unnaturally thin, wearing tattered clothes that looked like they'd been rotting for years. His face was wrong, like someone had stretched the skin too tight over his skull, but left the mouth too wide, the eyes too deep. He didn't move. I honked my horn, nothing. No flinch, no blink, just that empty stare. Every instinct told me to hit the gas and get the hell out of there, but I hesitated. What if he was hurt? What if he needed help? I reached for my radio. Breaker 19, this is Bluebird. Anyone got eyes on Highway 285? I got a loud thud against the driver's side door. I jumped, nearly dropping the radio. Another thud, and then another. I turned my head slowly, my stomach twisting into knots. There were hands, several, pressed against my window, but the fingers were too long. The nails cracked and blackened. The skin was pale, almost translucent. I couldn't breathe. I flicked my eyes back to the road. The man was gone, but the fog outside my windshield was moving, swirling, shifting, like something was crawling through it. I slammed my truck into gear and floored it. The rig lurched forward, tires skidding against the wet pavement. The hands slid off the window as I sped away, my pulse hammering in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached that truck stop. Didn't even pull into a spot properly. Just yanked the brakes and sat there, shaking, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. After a while, I forced myself to look in the mirrors. The fog was gone. The road was empty. But on the side of my truck, near the door, there were handprints. Long, smudged streaks, like something had been trying to climb inside. I never drove that stretch of road at night again.